My name is Detra Farrell. I'm 32 years old, and I can still hear the sound that changed everything. The violent shatter of glass that ripped me out of sleep at 6 o'clock a.m. on Christmas morning. For one perfect second, I thought it was a dream. The next, I was already running. My feet hit the cold stairs as my mind raced ahead of me. Intruder? Fire? Did Grandma fall again? I'd been home for less than 48 hours, after months of working overseas, and I wasn't prepared for chaos before sunrise. But nothing could have prepared me for what I found. When I reached the living room, the entire floor looked like a war zone of glitter, plastic shards, torn boxes, and crushed electronics. Standing in the center of the destruction, gripping my brother-in-law's hammer like it was a trophy, was my niece, 7-year-old Poppy. Her hair was a tangled halo. Her Christmas pajamas were soaked with tears and someone's spilled cocoa, and she didn't look scared. She looked satisfied. Before I could say a word, her cousins, David's boys, 13 and 15, screamed in unison, voices cracking with disbelief. "Our presents! You destroyed our presents!" They dropped to their knees, frantically picking through the debris of what used to be their tablets, gaming headsets, and expensive toys. David, Poppy's uncle, and the boy's father stormed in from the hallway, rage already rising in his voice. "Where's my belt?" But before he could take a step toward her, the boys launched themselves at Poppy. I didn't even have time to scream. They tackled her, slamming her tiny body into the floor as their fists flew, their hands clawing at her face like feral things. The adults in the doorway froze. No one moved. No one said a word. Except me. "Hey!" I roared, grabbing both boys by their collars and yanking them back with everything I had. They twisted, snarling like they were ready to attack me next, but I shoved them behind me and dropped to my knees beside Poppy. Blood streaked down her eyebrow, her lower lip trembled. Bruises were already blooming across her cheek. But instead of crying, she sat up, breathed deeply, and smirked. That expression chilled me more than the violence. "Where are our good presents?" David's boys shouted. "Where are the expensive ones?" And then I realized they weren't in the room. No PlayStations, no new phones, nothing pricey. Not smashed, not hidden, just gone. I turned to Poppy. "Sweetheart, what happened?" She didn't flinch. She didn't cower. She looked straight at David, blood dripping down her temple, and said, "Your sons are bullies." David exploded. "You little—" I blocked him with my arm. Poppy continued, voice steady despite her shaking hands. "Last year, they destroyed my friend's Christmas gift at school. Her mom saved for 6 months for that dollhouse. They stomped on it while she cried." David's wife gasped. "That's not true." Poppy ignored her. "This whole year, they ruined every present I got. Every single one. My birthday telescope, they smashed it. My art set, they burned it." David sputtered. "We never knew—" "I told everyone at Thanksgiving," Poppy snapped, her voice breaking just once. "I told you they destroyed the only photo I had of my mommy and daddy before they died." The room fell into a suffocating silence. I stared at her, my heart sinking into my stomach. She tried to tell us, and we didn't listen. I worked overseas, I was gone a lot, but still, she trusted me, and I missed all of it. "Poppy," I whispered, "why didn't you tell me?" Her chin quivered. I tried. And then, wiping the blood from her face with the back of her hand, she said, "I destroyed their presents, but that's not why I did it." A tremor moved through the room. Even the boys froze. Poppy pointed to the corner, where Grandma, lost in her dementia, wearing her reindeer pajamas, sat blinking at the commotion. "They stole from Grandma." My breath caught. "What?" I whispered. David's eyes widened. "That's impossible." "No, it's not." Poppy stood, wobbly, but fierce. "Last Tuesday night, I couldn't sleep. I heard footsteps in Grandma's room. Your boys took her bank card from her purse." David's wife staggered back. One of the boys shouted, "She's lying!" Poppy shook her head slowly, trembling but resolute. "They found her pin in her diary. Then they ran to the ATM. She reached into her pocket. I followed them. I have a video." The boys' faces drained of color. David snatched Grandma's phone, scrolling rapidly through her bank records. With each withdrawal, his expression turned ghost white. "Son, why would you—" "She gave us that money!" the older boy yelled. "She wanted us to have it." Poppy disappeared upstairs. Drawers slammed. She returned holding a letter. Grandma's shaky handwriting covered the page. "Dear Poppy, I'm getting worse. Some days I forget breakfast, but I remember the $2,000 I saved for Christmas charity. I want poor families to have presents. If I forget, please remind me. Love, Grandma." David's wife burst into tears. David whispered, "Why didn't you tell me, Poppy?" I did tell you, she screamed, grief exploding out of her. You slapped the phone out of my hand. You called me a liar. You hit me when I tried to show you the video. A crack formed across the entire family. You could feel it. Poppy wiped her cheeks, then spoke the words that would change everything. At 3:30 this morning, I listed all my cousin's expensive presents online for free. That's why they're gone. A stunned silence swallowed the house. Poppy lifted her chin. I didn't take a penny. I just made sure poor kids got their presents like Grandma wanted. David stared at her like she was a stranger. And then, the older boy bolted for the kitchen, drawers slamming, a knife glinting in his hand. I lunged, but he was already sprinting toward Poppy, blade raised. No, I screamed. I grabbed his wrist just as the knife slashed inches from her face, and the world exploded into chaos. The moment the knife flashed in the boy's hand, the world narrowed into a single, silent point. A breathless second where instinct moved faster than thought. I lunged. My hand clamped around his wrist just as the blade arced toward Poppy's face. His momentum crashed into me, and the two of us spun, skidding across the tile. Pain burned through my forearm as the knife sliced across my skin, hot and immediate. But I didn't let go. I couldn't. The boy fought with a strength no 15-year-old should have. Wild, frantic, animalistic. His brother dove in from behind, grabbing my other arm, trying to pry me off. Let go, he shrieked, eyes wide with panic and fury. Blood ran warm down my arm, my muscles screamed, but adrenaline surged harder. No one, I growled, twisting the older boy's wrist back, goes near her again. The knife wobbled in his grip. His fingers twitched, opening, closing, opening. I bent his wrist further. He screamed. The blade slipped. The metal clattered across the floor. Without taking my eyes off the boys, I kicked the knife as hard as I could. It slid under the stove, a place no one could reach without moving appliances. I shoved the older boy backward. He slammed into the wall and crumpled, glaring up at me with pure hatred. The room finally exhaled. David's wife screamed when she saw the blood pouring down my arm. David just stood there, stunned, mouth open, like he couldn't process what his son had almost done. Don't, I warned, raising my voice so everyone heard me. Nobody moves toward that knife or toward Poppy. The boys paced like caged wolves, their breaths sharp, their faces flushed. Their chests heaved in and out as if waiting for a chance to attack again. Poppy, my tiny niece with bruised cheeks and a stitched-up heart, wasn't crying. She wasn't trembling. She simply stared, jaw firm, as if she'd expected all of this. I needed to protect her, now. Poppy, I said, backing us toward the back door, keeping the boys in my sight. Take Grandma upstairs. Lock the bathroom door. She nodded, walked to Grandma's chair, and helped her to her feet. Grandma, sweet and lost, kept asking what all the noise was, her confusion twisting the knife deeper in my chest. As they moved toward the stairs, the younger boy lunged. I blocked him, planting both feet on the bottom step. You're not going anywhere near them. He stumbled back, teeth bared in something that wasn't quite human. Once I heard the bathroom lock click upstairs, I reached for my phone with my shaking, bloody hand. The boys saw it. Don't call them, the older one snarled. Don't you dare! I dialed 911 anyway. David snapped out of his shock and lunged toward me, grabbing my shoulder. Detra, stop! We can handle this in the family. No, I said, shaking him off. Your son tried to stab a 7-year-old. This stopped being just family a long time ago. The 911 operator answered, and I spoke quickly and clearly despite the chaos. Juvenile with a weapon, multiple injuries, elder financial abuse, send police and an ambulance. The boys erupted into panicked threats about deleting the video, about making Poppy pay, about fixing things before police arrived. David's wife checked their bank account, scrolling faster and faster. With each withdrawal she saw, her face turned whiter. David kept insisting I overreacted. Every word he said pushed a bitter, icy anger deeper into my chest. From upstairs, Poppy's small voice drifted through the bathroom door. I backed up the video. They can't delete it. Good girl. I taught her well. Sirens echoed in the distance. And suddenly, everyone who had been frozen in shock snapped into motion, fixing hair, straightening clothes, pretending the morning hadn't been a nightmare. The front door flew open. 2 officers stepped inside. Officer Mercier, a tall man with gray hair and a voice like gravel, took one look at my bleeding arm, the boys pacing like predators, and the shattered gifts across the room. Tell me what happened, he ordered. I pointed at the older boy first, then at the stairs. He tried to stab my niece after she exposed them for stealing from their grandmother. The boys protested, but the younger officer moved between them and the rest of the family. Mercier's jaw tightened. Weapon involved. Cuff him. The older boy exploded with screams, insisting it was unfair, but the officer didn't hesitate. The metal clicked around his wrists, and for the first time, he looked like what he was. Dangerous. I called upstairs, "Poppy, honey, come down." She appeared holding Grandma's hand, her face streaked with half-dried blood, her bruise darkening. Mercier's entire expression softened. "Sweetheart, are you safe showing me the video?" Poppy unlocked her phone with steady fingers. And there it was. Footage of the boys at the ATM, 2 a.m., withdrawing money over and over. Every dollar matching the timestamp on Grandma's statement. David's wife broke into sobs. David dropped into a chair and held his head in his hands. Mercier's disgust was palpable. He turned to the younger officer. "Secure the scene. This is going to be a long one." Paramedics arrived next and knelt beside me, peeling back the towel I'd wrapped around my arm. Their expressions tightened as blood soaked their gloves. "Needs cleaning. No stitches," one muttered. The sting of antiseptic burned like fire. They moved to Poppy next. "Her eyebrow needs closure at the ER," the female paramedic said gently. "We need x-rays of these bruises." Grandma started crying softly, asking if she had done something wrong, and I felt something inside me crack. Something protective, something furious, something unstoppable. Mercier handed me a pair of metal tongs. "We need to recover the knife." I crawled under the stove, grabbed it, and dropped it into the evidence bag. He nodded. "Good. Now I need your statement." So I told him everything. The bullying, the smashed presents, the destroyed photo, the ignored warnings, the knife, the stolen money, the bruises, the fear, the shame, the years. We didn't listen to her. David tried to interrupt. Mercier shut him down with a single look. Then he said the words that sealed the morning's fate. "We're looking at assault with a deadly weapon, child endangerment, and elder financial abuse. This isn't going away." Poppy's small hand slid into mine. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. She had fought alone for so long. And from this moment forward, she would never fight alone again. The ambulance doors closed behind us with a metallic thud, sealing in the smell of antiseptic and adrenaline. Poppy sat beside me on the narrow bench, her small fingers gripping mine, her legs dangling above the floor because they were too short to touch it. Her face was pale beneath the bruises, but her eyes stayed sharp, too sharp for a child who just survived a knife attack. The paramedic wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and glanced at me. "She's in shock, but holding steady. You both are." I nodded, though the truth was, my mind felt fractured, half here, half still. Back in that living room, replaying the moment the knife flashed inches from her face. "You saved her," the paramedic said quietly. "If you hadn't grabbed his wrist..." I didn't let him finish, because I knew exactly what would have happened. The ER felt colder than the morning air. Nurses parted the curtain for us, like they'd been expecting violence. Maybe they had. Holidays bring out chaos in families. A triage nurse whisked Poppy away gently, documenting every bruise, cut, and abrasion. They treated my arm quickly, wrapping it in fresh gauze and telling me to come back for a wound check in a few days. But I barely felt the pain anymore. My brain was too busy replaying everything I'd missed. How long had she been asking for help? How long had I been overseas, thinking the occasional video call was enough? A doctor stepped in, a calm woman with bright eyes and a soothing voice. "I'm Dr. Jules Madison. I'll take care of her," she said, smiling gently at Poppy. "I heard you were very brave today." Poppy didn't smile back. She just nodded, gripping the stuffed reindeer a nurse had given her. Dr. Madison stitched the cut above her eye with slow, careful movements, distracting her with stories about her cat's ridiculous holiday sweater and her failed attempts at baking gingerbread. For the first time, Poppy's body relaxed. Just a little. When the stitches were done, Poppy whispered, "Thank you," barely audible. Dr. Madison squeezed her hand. "Sweetheart, you're safe now." I hoped she was right. But deep inside, I knew safety wasn't something we could assume. Not with the boys' rage, not with the family's denial, not with the guilt already rising like smoke in the back of my mind. A hospital social worker named Irene came next, clipboard in hand. Her voice was soft, but the weight of her questions was heavy. "We have to file a CPS report," she explained. "This is protocol with injuries like these." "I understand," I said. "Do whatever you need." For once, the system was on our side. While Irene gathered details, my phone buzzed. A text from Detective Mercier. "Knife secured, both boys in juvenile intake. Older one likely detained. Younger may be released to another relative." I didn't respond. I just stared at the message, trying to let the reality settle. 2 boys. One nearly stabbed my niece. Both stole from their grandmother. And they might still get the chance to try something else. A second buzz vibrated against my palm. David, we don't need cops. This will ruin their futures. Don't help the prosecution. My hand shook with anger. I screenshot the message and saved it. Witness tampering, plain as day. He still didn't understand. At some point, the fluorescent lights dimmed to evening mode. Poppy fell asleep on the hospital bed, curled on her side like a child exhausted by a storm. I brushed hair from her face and felt a pang. Bruises where soft skin should be, stitches where innocence should have been untouched. A knock sounded at the curtain. A woman in business clothes stepped inside, badge clipped to her belt. Ms. Farrell, I'm Jenny Abernathy, Child Protective Services. I need to speak with Poppy privately. My stomach tightened. Of course. I stepped into the hallway. Through the thin curtain, I heard Poppy's voice, small but steady, as she recounted the torment she'd been living through. Locked closets, destroyed toys, bruises hidden under long sleeves, cousins who laughed when she cried, adults who didn't believe her. Each word hit me like a stone. Each detail carved another line of guilt into my ribcage. 40 minutes later, Jenny emerged. She's incredibly articulate for her age, she said. She's been protecting herself for a long time. I swallowed hard. What happens now? We need to ensure her immediate safety. She pulled out her phone. I'll call her uncle. I stiffened. David? Yes. Legally, he and his wife have guardianship. Not anymore, I said, my voice low and steady. They ignored her abuse. They enabled it. One of their sons tried to kill her today. Jenny studied my face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I believe you're right. Let me make this clear. She straightened, her tone shifting into something formal. Effective immediately, neither boy may come within 100 feet of Poppy Farrell. No direct or indirect contact of any kind. Violations will result in immediate detention. A weight lifted from my chest, then shifted into a new one. Responsibility. Jenny glanced at her tablet. Now, can you temporarily take her? My breath caught. Of course I can. I don't care what it takes. She hesitated. Even with your overseas job, I'll figure it out. Because there was no universe where I let Poppy return to that house. Inside the hospital room, Poppy stirred awake. Aunt Detra? Are we going home? I sat beside her and brushed her hair gently. You're coming with me. Her eyes fluttered with fragile relief. Okay. But the moment lingered only a second before my phone rang again. David's wife. She was sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. Detra, I found more. On their phones, videos, texts. They bragged about hurting her. They searched how to do it without leaving marks. I closed my eyes, the horror settling deeper. Send everything to Detective Mercier, I said. All of it. After I hung up, the ER nurse arrived with discharge papers and a folder nearly an inch thick. Medical documentation, injury reports, instructions for wound care, psychological evaluation notes. I packed them neatly into my bag like delicate explosives. Then I carried Poppy in my arms through the hospital doors into the cold afternoon light. She laid her head on my shoulder, breathing softly. Are we safe now? She whispered. I held her tighter. Yes, I lied. You're safe. But the truth was heavier. This wasn't the end. This was only the beginning. For 3 days, my apartment became a sanctuary. A small, quiet island in the middle of a storm that only seemed to grow louder beyond its walls. Poppy slept in my bed, curled against a mountain of pillows, waking up twice each night from nightmares she couldn't describe. I moved my laptop, work files, suitcases, everything I owned to the living room floor, just so she could have a sense of safety. The wound on my arm throbbed constantly, but I didn't care. Pain meant nothing compared to the way she flinched whenever she heard footsteps in the hallway. On the morning of our court hearing, she clung to my hand so tightly the circulation nearly stopped. We entered the courthouse, a building full of echoing marble, and people pretending not to stare at the bruised little girl beside me. Inside the courtroom, CPS presented photos, medical records, the ATM video, Grandma's letter, screenshots of the boys' messages, every terrible truth laid bare beneath fluorescent lights. David and his wife sat on the opposite bench. She was crying quietly the entire time. David wouldn't look at anyone. When the judge read her decision, her voice was firm and final. A no-contact order will remain in place. The boys are prohibited from approaching, contacting, or communicating with Poppy Farrell in any manner. They will reside with their aunt while the CPS investigation continues. David's head dropped into his hands. His wife covered her mouth. Poppy squeezed my fingers harder, almost painfully. Afterward, in the hallway, the CPS intake officer handed me a stack of documents. "You're now her temporary caregiver," she said. "Keep receipts for any expenses. We'll discuss long-term guardianship once the investigation progresses." Long-term. The words hit me with a weight I wasn't ready for, but also one I knew I would never reject. Poppy looked up at me, her stitched eyebrow wrinkling. "You're not sending me back there, right?" I knelt down, cupping her cheeks gently. "Never. Not until a judge says it's safe, which it's not, and not until you feel safe." She nodded, but her lip trembled. "Okay." As we left the courthouse, my phone buzzed. Ethan. I had almost forgotten to breathe when I saw his name. He and I had been together a year, and he was the type of man who listened fully, loved quietly, and steadied the world around him. I hadn't wanted to pull him into this mess, but he'd insisted he was here for me, for us, no matter what. "Let me know how the hearing goes. I'm here if you need me. I can bring food, help with errands, anything." I swallowed a lump in my throat and typed back a quick message, promising to call him later. We needed his steadiness now more than ever. The days that followed, the CPS investigation churned forward like a slow-moving engine. Home visits, phone calls, volunteers scribbling notes, questions asked in soft voices that still managed to hurt. Meanwhile, I tried to rebuild some semblance of normalcy. I swapped out my work desk for a second-hand dresser and storage cubes. I bought Poppy a small lamp shaped like a star. She spent hours sitting cross-legged on the carpet, drawing quietly, carefully, like she was afraid her art supplies might disappear again. Every day had new challenges. The elementary school counselor arranged meetings to help Poppy re-enter classes safely. She created a buddy system, emergency contacts, safe spots, even practiced exit routes with her. "I won't make you face anyone you're not ready to face," the counselor told her. Poppy nodded, staring down at her sneakers. "Okay." Grandma was worse. 3 mornings after the hearing, I found Grandma missing. Poppy was still asleep, and panic slammed into me like a car crash. I ran outside in pajamas and boots, shouting her name. I searched the neighborhood, the bus stops, the community center. I finally found her 3 miles away, sitting on a cold metal bench in front of the old brick church. "Grandma," I breathed, kneeling beside her. "What are you doing here?" "I needed to give money to the poor," she whispered. "They need help." She had no purse, no money, no memory of the theft. The dementia had gotten worse, and far too fast. I drove her home with a heavy chest, realizing the stolen charity fund wasn't just money. It was her last grasp at purpose. Now even that had been torn from her. I researched memory care facilities that evening. Everything cost thousands. Waiting lists were months long. David should have been handling this, but between lawyer bills and court appearances for his sons, he wasn't helping at all. Poppy sat beside me while I worked, coloring quietly. "Grandma's sick," she said, not looking up. "She needs someone like you, too." Her voice was soft, but the words struck me hard. I wasn't just becoming her guardian. I was becoming the glue. The last stable piece of a family falling apart in every direction. The diversion program. 2 weeks later, the juvenile hearing took place. The prosecutor outlined a proposed diversion program: mandatory counseling, weekly probation check-ins, community service, restitution to Grandma, 0 contact with Poppy. It sounded fair, on paper. But then the prosecutor mentioned restitution. "The stolen $2,000 must be returned," he said. However, the boys spent everything on the expensive gifts Poppy gave away. A silence spread. No one breathed. It would take them years to pay the money back. But I wasn't here for revenge. "I agree to the program," I said quietly. "As long as Poppy remains protected, that's all I care about." The judge nodded. "The protective orders stay in place." Relief washed through me like warm water. But reality still bit hard. My job, the one that paid for everything, was slipping away. I requested emergency leave, but in the fine print of my contract were words that suddenly seemed cruel. Unpaid. No guarantee of position upon return. I was bleeding savings faster than I could track. And yet, when I looked at Poppy, small, fragile, trying desperately to be brave, only one thought remained. Leaving her was not an option. Ethan showed up that night with bags of groceries, new curtains for Poppy's room, a stuffed sloth, and a look that said he'd never seen me this exhausted. "You don't have to do this alone," he said, voice soft. "Let me help." For a moment, the weight on my shoulders eased. But the storm wasn't done with us yet. Near collision. 3 days later, while walking Poppy to the community center for an art workshop, a car slowed beside us. My breath stopped. It was David, alone. He rolled down the window, face red, eyes swollen. "Deetra," he said, voice cracking. "Please, we need to talk." I stepped in front of Poppy. You're violating the order. I'm not here about the boys, he pleaded. I'm here about Mom. She wandered off again. I can't handle this alone. Poppy tightened her grip on my coat. I felt her trembling. Drive away, David, I said, or I'm calling the police. For a split second, rage flashed across his face, pure, unfiltered resentment. Then he drove off. I stood there long after the car disappeared, and in the pit of my stomach, something shifted. This family wasn't just broken. It was collapsing. And I had a choice to make, one that would decide not only Poppy's future, but my own.